Even though Astra has been out for almost 6 months, she is still the strongest support by far, and even with Ishwen and 2.0's release, Astra's importance and impact on endgame content is undeniable. With that, today I'll be breaking down everything you need to know about Astra and her gameplay, but before we go any further, I do need to address the obvious here. While yes, Astra is probably the easiest character to understand and play, she does still have mechanics that can be used to increase your DPS's damage by a significant amount. With this out of the way though, if you learned or enjoyed today's video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But without further ado, let's break down Astra and whether she's actually worth pulling for in her rerun banner. Astra, though similar to other agents in being a buffer, is much different in playstyle. Unlike characters like Nicole, who sometimes require you to reapply her defense shred due to its short duration, Astra is much more unique. After Astra is on field and has used her EX special a single time to enter into her singing state, she has no additional required field time at all. Everything from maintaining or reapplying her buffs from this point on are all doable while she remains off field, and while there hasn't been another character like Astra quite yet, there have been similar characters released, such as Trigger and characters like Pan Yinhu. This part of the video is sponsored by Apocalypse: The Scarlet Covenant, a post-apocalyptic anime-style strategy RPG packed with amazing characters plus deep strategy, and right now is honestly the best time to check it out. Starting on June 14th, they're kicking off the game's 1.5-year anniversary celebration, and it's bringing a ton of free rewards and bonuses. This includes double top-ups, outfit discounts, and check-in events just for logging in, but the real highlight of it all is the release of a brand new character, Rosabelle. She officially drops on June 22nd with her Oath outfit, and she's not just another character. Rosabelle is a fierce, powerful DPS with her own cinematic Oath animation, and she's also got a character video alongside a custom designed outfit that's honestly one of the cleanest that I've ever seen in this game. For those of you unfamiliar with the game, this is a 2D sci-fi gacha RPG, and the core gameplay behind this is leading several characters into battle as you uncover the secrets of a ruined world. As a reminder, make sure to use this link so that you'll get access to all these bonuses, including Rosabelle's debut, and join the 1.5-year anniversary celebration. Thanks again to Apocalypse for sponsoring today's video. To break down her kit, however, let's first start talking about Astra's unique state and her unique resource. After entering the idyllic Cadenza state, Astra increases the squad's damage by 20% and their crit damage by 25%. This is just one half of the buffs that she provides, however, but it's worth noting that when she is swapped off field, these buffs remain, and she also gains invulnerability, so you don't have to worry about her getting hit while singing on field. Though uncommon, it is also worth mentioning that swapping back to Astra from this point will automatically have her perform wind chimes and oaths, which is decent but not super noteworthy, as this isn't super insane and isn't a massive DPS increase. The other unique part about her kit is her unique resource known as cords. For every 25 points of energy, Astra gains 1 cord, and while in said singing state, assuming Astra has cords, a quick assist can then be activated through 2 ways. First, by attacking an enemy, which can only be triggered once every 3 seconds, or by using a heavy attack against an enemy, which can only be triggered once every 1 second. Pay attention to this, as this will be important later when we talk about her combos. Additionally, when other agents enter the field through a quick assist, defensive/evasive assist, or a chain attack, Astra will also consume 25 energy and release 1 tremolo to attack the enemy. The final aspect of her cord passive is in regards to precise assists. Triggering a quick assist and activating the glowing prompt grants a precise assist, which releases 3 tone clusters. This attack can also then be activated when allies enter through chain attacks, defensive assists, or evasive assists. However, what's most important here is that the tremolo attacks that Astra performs also count as EX special attacks. Now you might be wondering why I'm mentioning this, however it's very important once we talk about her W engine choices, and of course we'll get to that once we reach that section. Let's move to her core passive now, which is the other half of her buffing aspect. In her singing state, quick assists, chain attacks, defensive/evasive assists, or releasing a tremolo will increase Astra and her allies' attack. Now to be clear, the scaling on this is important as it will affect how you build your Astra. This buff to attack scales with 35% of Astra's initial attack up to a maximum of 1200, and this effect lasts 20 seconds but can be extended to 30. This means that to gain the 20 or 30 second buff, you will need 3428 attack on Astra's stat page, and yes, this does not include any combat buffs received while fighting that would otherwise increase this number. As a final mention and a reminder, this will again be very important when choosing main stats, substats, and disk drive sets for Astra, but again, for another section. Astra's additional ability, though nice, is honestly not that important since it simply acts as another tremolo or tone cluster attack whenever Astra consumes energy. What's most important about it, however, is that it does mean that Astra can synergize with both anomaly and attack agents, which is pretty versatile and also cool. However, it is also worth mentioning that Astra has been changed so that rupture agents also synergize with her, but of course the only character that this is relevant for currently is Yi Xuan. Now let's break down her actual attacks. Astra has a number of basic attacks available to her, including Capriccio, Interlude, Chorus, and Finale, but truthfully, the only one really worth talking about is Finale. This is the only way for Astra to leave her singing state, but as I'm sure you can guess, there aren't many good reasons to do so, right? Well, unlike an agent like Bernice or Jane who loses their resonance gauge and will eventually exit their special form, Astra Yao just stays on field and waits for her energy to recharge. Therefore, this and most of Astra's kit is pretty irrelevant outside of buffing her team, but let's now talk about her special attacks. Astra interestingly only has one special attack, and this is in the form of Wind Chimes and Oaths. This attack puts Astra into her singing state, releases a tremolo, deals ether damage, and can be held down to draw enemies close to each other, kind of similar to that of Sokaku's Vacuum or a much weaker Nicole Black Hole. What I find to be the most interesting about this ability, however, is the clumping ability together while also costing nothing to cast. Now, unlike other agents where their special attacks consume energy for added benefit, Wind Chimes and Oaths has the same effect regardless of how much energy Astra has to begin with, and given the possibilities of using it as a gathering or grouping mechanic, it could be really cool. However, beyond all this, given the zero energy cost to cast, using this to enter into Astra's singing form is absolutely priority and the most important thing that you should do at the start of any battle. Now, Astra's dodge would be worth talking about if we ever performed it, but put plainly, since we don't really play as Astra Yao per se, we don't really have many opportunities to dodge whatsoever. That said, she does have a 2 charge based system with her dodges, and it does look cool when she performs them. Astra Yao's own assists are not very special since her allies are the ones who gain the most from precise assists being casted, but she does have an evasive assist if you for some reason feel the need to activate Vital View. Astra's chain attack puts her back into her singing state alongside dealing a mediocre amount of damage. Really, it's not that insane, but really, unless you're using Swing Jazz on Astra, her chain is not really worth doing at all. Finally, however, we have Astra's ultimate. To be clear, this was the first ever ability in ZenlessZoneZero that had healing attached to it, and let me be the one to refresh everyone's memory. It did and still does feel amazing to have an on-command heal. Now, this isn't the only thing that this ability does, however, since it also replaces the next 2 quick assists following it with chain attacks instead, but I just wanted to highlight that as someone who spent many hours in the battle tower, Astra's ultimate definitely earned its value regardless of how good Avocado Boo was. For skill priority, Astra's core passive is the most important, and following this, increasing her EX special level is amazing since it provides you with increased damage percent and crit damage percent at certain thresholds. Now, to be more specific in what I mean, what I'm referring to is that at levels 6, 7, and 12 of her EX special, the damage buffs are increased when reaching these breakpoints. So in terms of priority, reaching any of these levels first is crucial, but after upgrading her EX special, her chain attack is the next best choice since the amount of healing that she provides via her ultimate directly correlates to what level this ability is. Beyond this, any remaining skills can then be upgraded in any order since they don't generally add to her kit, but if you're starving or out of resources for whatever reason, I would definitely hold off on upgrading her abilities that aren't her EX special, core passive, and ultimate. Now, when it comes to Astra Yao's W engine options, she is surprisingly flexible, but there's a bit of a twist for newer players. Unlike most characters, Astra performs extremely well with multiple A-rank W engines, not just her own signature. Bashful Demon, which is Sokaku's signature, is currently what I have found to deal the highest amount of damage, as it gives 25% attack, helps Astra hit the crucial 3,428 attack threshold to maximize her core passive, and on top of this, its passive provides a 14.4% team-wide attack buff that's pretty easy to maintain. Now, even though Astra can't make use of the ice damage from this W engine, it would be dishonest to ignore just how impactful the raw attack scaling is on this W engine. Despite this, it is also of course worth mentioning that Kaboom, which is Lucy's signature, is also super amazing, with it honestly coming close to or even matching Sokaku's signature in some cases. I do want to mention that both it and Bashful Demon often outperform Astra's own signature in practice, but as with all W engines that I'm about to describe, each of these W engines have their own unique situation where they work best, best. However, I do want to make the specific note that if you do end up pulling for Astra's W engine, you not only get the special effect as most characters do when they get their W engine, but this does also provide a much easier gearing and building process for Astra Yao's attack threshold. As a reminder, missing a little bit of attack is not the end of the world. However, in terms of what W engines give what main stat, this will be important for later as we build Astra Yao. Now, if we move to other W engines like Slice of Time and Mark 1, these are obviously much weaker. Slice of Time offers pen ratio, which Astra doesn't really benefit from, and Mark 1's passive is too situational and inconsistent for this to really make a difference. Now, despite that, I do want to mention that a lot of the A rank W engines that I mentioned earlier have no craftable option and are therefore pretty gacha reliant in terms of accessing them. As a result, if you don't have access to any of the W engines that I mentioned earlier, you could use Slice of Time or Mark 1 if you have absolutely no better alternatives. Now, as a result of this, if you're someone that's curious about whether Astra's W engine is worth pulling for, the answer is no, unless you want an easier time building her or you like the visual effects of the W engine. But I do just want to re-emphasize that if you don't have access to the gacha A rank support W engines, your options are not just weak, they feel very underwhelming. Now, again, if you do have Bashful Demon or Kaboom, these are great options that you should definitely pick up, but otherwise you can just stick with Slice of Time, Mark 1, or any W engine that has attack percent or energy regen while you temporarily wait for a better option. Moving from W engines, it's now time we talk about Astra's build. Despite the gap of about 6 months since I last talked about Astra, there really hasn't been much change in terms of her viable disk drives, so Astra's ideal setup will feel pretty similar to what I've recommended before. Given her no time on field playstyle, Astra Voice as her 4-piece and Swing Jazz as her 2-piece option is nice if you actually want to make the most out of these disk drives. Now, while I did recommend Astra Voice and Swing Jazz, there are some things that you should consider with 2.0's release. First, both Ishwen and Panda work very well with Astra, and as a result, you may actually end up changing the disk drives that you have on her currently as a result of this team. To maximize Ishwen's damage output, you would really prefer Swing Jazz on Astra instead of Astra Voice, as the 4-piece passive from Swing Jazz will work on any unit on the team. That said, in terms of who should have Astra Voice, Panda was definitely made to use this, and definitely has a much weaker ultimate or chain attack if you're trying to make use of Swing Jazz. That said, for any team that doesn't have a stunner or a support or a Panda, you should definitely still use 4-piece Astra Voice on Astra, as it is not only the named choice for her, it's also the best choice overall in terms of adding team DPS. Now, if you're here thinking about putting Astra Voice on your stunner, think again, as the new stun set King of the Summit is a much better choice, as the damage buff it gives to your team is stronger than a lot of the buffs that Astra Voice gives, especially when considering the buffs that you actually get from having a stunner gain stun value. I know, shocking. As for the 2-piece sets, Swing Jazz / Astra Voice / Hormone Punk are really the only choices here depending on what your goals are, and with it, the energy regen is nice for generating additional quick assist casts, and Astra Voice / Hormone Punk can definitely be used if you're looking to maximize your attack thresholds. Now, on the topic of stats, that now leads us to her main stats. Both Astra's disk drive options and main stat choices are pretty much the same, but there is one consideration if we have good enough rolls or if she's easy to build while having her signature W engine. Before we get to that specifically though, you'll be happy to know that her best 4th and 5th slot main stats are just going to be attack percent. Now, as we consider her 6th slot, however, there is something that we need to address. Based on my findings from building and upgrading Astra, there were a few different setups that would lead to Astra missing the attack threshold needed to max that attack buff, and this is definitely something that could affect her choice in what you select in the 6th slot. Now, again, there are other factors here at play, including whether Astra would even need the energy regen if a fight is over quickly, but strictly stat-wise, using a W engine that has energy regen or a non-attack percent main stat will actually cause Astra to fall below the 3,428 attack breakpoint that you'd otherwise need to max out her attack buff. Now, again, this could affect your clear time depending on the scenario. However, some runs that I had with A rank W engines still outperformed its peers despite not being at max attack. Therefore, alternating between energy regen for more consistent quick assists and then using attack percent for the sake of maxing out your buff is totally fine and an interchangeable option. All I recommend is that you do your research and test the fight before you actually commit to this, as again, you don't want to waste resources. Now, my personal recommendation with all this out of the way is the following. Stat-wise, 4-piece Astral. However, if you do have another agent who desires Astral as well, using 4-piece Swing Jazz on Astra specifically alongside 2-piece Astral Voice in that case will still do amazingly. Moving to stats as previously mentioned, 4th slot attack, 5th slot attack, and 6th slot energy regen or attack percent depending on the fight length is going to be your goal. However, for a sample stat line, the only numbers that really matter are your attack and your energy regen, with this reaching as close to the 3,428 attack threshold or 2.8 energy regen will be your highest priority. Now, while Astra Yao's combos haven't really changed or evolved since her initial release, there are a few mechanics that you can take advantage of. One of these is the ability to keep track of and manipulate / time the Astral Voice 4-piece set bonus using heavy attacks. Since the cooldown timers for quick assists differ from heavy attacks and basics, you can then use the 1-second cooldown from a heavy attack to quick assist from another agent onto your DPS. This then allows you to immediately swap back to Astra to cast her ultimate, which then of course resets the Astral Voice buff. If you're confused about what I'm specifically referring to, just know that the Astral Voice buff doesn't always apply to every damage dealing skill you use, and that's mostly a timing or sequencing issue, but being able to time or sequence your actions so that every attack or ability can benefit from the buff is also equally as important. Now let's talk about one of the most impactful mechanics that many players have been using to prevent the quick assist prompt from appearing every time that Astra's ultimate is used. This means no more chain attacking forcibly or waiting extra time with your main DPS after Astra uses her ultimate, and the trick is honestly simple. By holding down Astra's basic attack at the end of her ultimate, you can then swap to your DPS and perform the first of Astra's 2 free chain attacks without triggering the quick assist prompt whatsoever. This then allows you to swap back to Astra from said DPS immediately following this, giving you 2 chain attacks back to back from your desired DPS agent instead of from a support or utility agent. Moving to her Mindscapes, there are a few that are amazing while others are more deceptive. To give more context, her first Mindscape is very powerful for the 6% all res reduction it provides, but there isn't that much to say. This Mindscape is simple and powerful as it adds value to your team's overall DPS, and between her original buffs and this new buff, the Mindscape offers a significant increase to your overall damage. That's not all, however, since the added decibels plus Song of Protection adds even more value, with Astra suddenly becoming a pseudo shielder with Song of Protection's invulnerability. This, alongside having an easier time to activate ultimate, makes Astra's first Mindscape a great choice for anyone who is on the fence about pulling for her W engine and decided against it. Now overall, while this first Mindscape is powerful, it is worth mentioning that her other Mindscapes offer great value too. Her second Mindscape in particular is pretty decent as well, since this will increase the amount of attack gained by 19% through her core passive, but admittedly this is nowhere near as insane as gaining a resistance shred. Her fourth Mindscape provides a variety of buffs thanks to Astra's team that can be helpful, but this is actually the last but most impactful Mindscape that Astra has. The most interesting thing about the fourth Mindscape is how Astra can now trigger a quick assist with no cords as long as it has been seen. Now this might seem odd since the sixth Mindscape of most agents is very powerful, but actually with Astra's kit currently, her final Mindscape is lower value. To be clear, gaining free stat and additional multipliers is amazing in theory, but since Astra is more focused on providing damage and buffing the team, this Mindscape is less valuable overall. Now finally, we have the topic of teams, so let's now address Astra and what her role is in any team composition. This should come as no surprise to anyone, but Astra can fill 2 roles on a team. She can make worse units look decent, and she can make good agents look great. That said, with 2.0's release, Astra is also a great support for both Yixuan and Pan Yinhu, as her kit fits perfectly with how they both play. Yixuan and Pan both rely on fast swaps, quick assists, and short field time, so Astra plays off of them perfectly with her buffs, energy regeneration, and chain attacks without needing to stay on field for long. This lets Yixuan stay active longer and deal more damage, while Pan sets up his buff and joins Astra off field to support from beyond. Now, as you'd imagine, Astra's selfless playstyle and powerful passive buffs make her a game changer on any team, and whenever she's used in said teams, she accounts for roughly a 10% increase to team DPS, regardless of who she's paired with. Now, on the topic of Yixuan though, she is easily one of the best partners for Astra Yao, as her kit allows Yixuan to almost permanently be on the field and maximize her DPS. Similar to characters like Miyabi or Jane, this is extremely helpful for 2 reasons. It adds to the comfort and simplicity of each agent's playstyle, but also boosts their total damage and what they can clear. This is a win-win. To add to this though, the constant quick assist spam allows Yixuan specifically to deal more damage while also generating decibels, and since Yixuan benefits greatly whenever she's on field, these extra swaps and decibel generation will definitely help towards our goal of building more ultimate casts. Other notable Astra teams included lineups with Miyabi Yanagi Astra, Bernice Yanagi Astra, Juyuan Nicole Astra, Ellen Lighter Astra, and Jane Vivian Astra, and I'm sure you can see the trend here. The addition of Astra to nearly any lineup setup with a limited DPS and a limited support/stunner is absolutely insane. Now, though some of these teams perform even better than others listed, it's important to remember that Astra herself can still be used in any team possible for great value. To give a brief summary of my experiences, however, I would like to mention that Miyabi, a flex pick between Vivian, Yanagi, and Bernice, alongside Astra, were easily the highest performers from my experience in Pre 2.0. That said, once Ishwan was released, I did find her to perform exceptionally well against bosses with Miasma, though admittedly the difference in clear and fuel was not significant enough for people to really consider this as bad. Now, overall though, it would be dishonest to pin one character or team as insanely ahead of all others, especially with 2.0's recent release, but I did want to take a moment to talk about Astra and her value on a team. Recently, a major trend in endgame content like Deadly Assault has been the push to cheapen or cheap out teams, meaning that the goal is to clear difficult stages with as few limited agents as possible. This shift led to an extensive testing of team compositions that don't rely on insane limiteds like Lighter or Trigger, and surprisingly, strong teams did end up emerging from this testing. This includes teams like Miyabi, Lycon, Sokaku, and even Ishwen, Pan, and Pulchra, praised not just for their performance, but their also low investment costs. This context highlights Astra's true value. Rather than already elevating top-tier teams, Astra shines as a stabilizer or crutch, giving weaker or off-meta comps the teams that they need to really invest and deal some damage. Now, of course, this does make her especially useful when paired with DPS that aren't ideal for the current Deadly Assault, and this of course offers a more reliable path towards progressing your account without relying on perfect pulls or the perfect setup. As we end today's guide, the final burning question that I know a lot of you are waiting to be answered in regard to her pull value: is Astra still worth pulling for? Well, there really are just that many factors to consider here, but personally I found that supports in Zenless have drastically changed the way that I play team compositions. And whether it's in regards to Caesar's Barrier and the Battle Tower, or with Nicole's grouping and Shio defense, there is amazing value overall when it comes to any support on any team. However, there are still reasons that Astra may feel worse to pull for, and this is mostly in regards to her play, where I certainly acknowledge that the boring nature or the inability to really quote-unquote play Astra is kind of like a wasted opportunity. Additionally, with the introduction of another healing agent in the form of an A rank who also spends minimal time on field, it's tough to say whether pulling for another S rank or a 1.0 character will actually be worth it. That said, given her versatility and her insane damage increases to any teams she's added in, I believe she'll definitely be useful for the foreseeable future, especially if they don't plan on adding more HP scaling characters. Who knows though? That's going to be it for today's video though, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed or learned something. If you did, as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you again for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night. Aren't ideal for the current Deadly Assault,